Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
And we have a truly fascinating deep dive planned for you today.
We really do. Yeah. I want to jump right into the deep end here because the text we're unpacking today is, well, it's quite frankly one of the most bizarre, captivating, and just ultimately beautiful pieces of ancient literature you will ever encounter.
Absolutely.
We are exploring the apocryphal Book of Tobit. And if you aren't familiar with it, let me just give you a quick preview of the wild elements we're dealing with in this.
Prepare yourself. It's quite a list.
It really is. So in this one ancient text, we have a devout, incredibly generous man who is certainly blinded by, wait for it, warm sparrow droppings falling into his eyes.
Yeah, you heard that right. Sparrow droppings.
Right. And then we have a despairing young woman who has lost 7 different husbands on her wedding nights to a jealous, murderous demon.
7 husbands? 7. Plus, we have a magical giant fish leaping out of a river to attack a traveler. We have a faithful dog tagging along on a cross-country road trip. And tying it all together, we have a literal archangel working entirely undercover as a day laborer for, like, a drachma a day.
It sounds like a pitch for an ancient fantasy novel when you lay it out like that. Or, I don't know, maybe a surrealist independent film.
Exactly. It sounds totally absurd.
But our mission today is to look right past those supernatural tropes and all the ancient folklore. We want to extract the beating heart of this text.
Because there is one, right? A really profound one.
Oh, absolutely. Because beneath the giant fish and the disguised angels, the Book of Tobit is actually a profound, incredibly practical guidebook. It is fundamentally a story about how to live faithfully, how to maintain your core identity, and really, how to find hope when your world has completely and utterly fallen apart.
I think that's exactly why this text feels so relevant for you listening right now, despite it being, thousands of years old.
Yeah, human nature hasn't changed all that much. No, it hasn't. But to understand the wisdom and to understand why the author included demons and magic fish in the first place, we really have to understand the world it was written for.
Context is everything here.
Right, so let's ground this in the history. The story claims to be set in the 8th century BC during the Assyrian captivity, right?
That's the setting, yes.
So Tobit is an Israelite from the northern kingdom, and he's carried away to the capital city of Nineveh by the Assyrians. But the sources we're looking at suggest that's not actually when the book was written.
Exactly. The setting is the 8th century BC, but scholars overwhelmingly agree the book was actually written much later, probably around 200 BC or maybe early in the 2nd century BC.
Oh, wow. So quite a big gap there.
A massive gap. The author was likely a Jewish writer living in the diaspora, probably in Egypt or perhaps Hellenistic Judea.
Okay, so it's essentially historical fiction.
Yes, precisely.
The author is using an ancient setting, so the traumatic Assyrian exile of their ancestors, as this literary device to talk to their current contemporaries hundreds of years later.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Imagine a writer today writing a novel set during the American Civil War to, comment on modern political division.
Oh, that makes total sense.
That's exactly what the author of Tobit is doing. He's writing to Jews who are living as a minority in the Hellenistic world. Because after the conquests of Alexander the Great, Greek culture Hellenism was the dominant global force.
It was everywhere.
Everywhere. If you were a Jew living in Egypt or Syria around 200 BC, you weren't necessarily a physical slave in chains, but you were swimming in this massive sea of foreign influence.
Greek language, Greek gymnasiums, all of that.
Right. Greek civic life, polytheistic religion. It was all just ubiquitous.
And the pressure to conform must have been immense, right? Like if you wanted to get ahead in business or if you wanted social standing, the easiest path was to just drop your ancestral traditions and act Greek.
Oh, it was the ultimate pressure cooker for assimilation. And what's really fascinating is how culturally aware the author of Tobit was. He doesn't just write a dry theological treatise telling people to obey the Torah.
Because nobody wants to read that.
Exactly. He writes a blockbuster narrative. And to do it, he weaves together Jewish theology with popular global folklore of his day.
Which is such a smart strategy.
It is. For instance, he borrows heavily from a widespread ancient folktale known as the Fable of the Grateful Dead.
The Grateful Dead. Wait, like the band?
Yes. The band actually took their name from this ancient folklore motif.
I had no idea. That is amazing.
It's a fun bit of trivia. But the Grateful Dead fable is a story found all over the ancient world where a protagonist bankrupts himself to provide a proper burial for a complete stranger.
Okay.
And then later, the protagonist is in mortal danger, and he is saved by a mysterious companion who eventually reveals himself to be the spirit of the dead man he buried.
Oh, wow. That's a great concept.
It is. So the author of Tobit takes that famous narrative structure, but rewrites it through a strictly Jewish theological lens. Instead of the ghost of a dead man, the helper becomes Raphael, an archangel sent by the God of Israel.
That is brilliant. It's like taking the familiar structure of a Marvel superhero movie and using it to teach Stoic philosophy or something.
That's exactly what it is.
People already know the beats of the story, so you just use that vehicle to deliver your own cultural message. I also read in our sources that there's a heavy Persian influence here, right?
Very much so. You have to remember, before the Greeks took over, the Jewish people lived under the Persian Empire for over 2 centuries.
Right, so they absorbed a lot.
Tons of cultural ideas, particularly Zoroastrian concepts of dualism and demonology. In Tobit, the villainous demon is named Asmodeus. Scholars trace this directly to the Persian Eshmadadeva, which is a major demon of wrath and lust in Zoroastrianism.
It's all connected.
It is. And the author also weaves in the story of Ahikar, which is a famous ancient Near Eastern tale of a wise court official who is betrayed by his nephew, but eventually restored.
Wait, Ahikar is actually in Tobit, isn't he?
Yes, Ahikar actually appears in the Book of Tobit as Tobit's own nephew.
Okay, so the author is mashing up Persian demonology, Egyptian folktales, and Mesopotamian court legends. It's a huge blend. But why? What is the core driving reason to write this massive cultural mashup?
It was an antidote to assimilation. He was writing to a minority group trying to keep their identity and values intact while surrounded by a dominant, alien, and sometimes a very hostile culture.
It's survival manual.
Exactly. He's telling them, I know you are in exile. I know the culture around you is powerful, but our God is still active, our traditions still matter, and you must hold the line.
You know, I've been thinking about how this translates for you, the listener, today, because obviously most of us aren't living as ancient exiles under Greek rule.
Right. The literal context is very different.
But the psychological experience of being pressured by a dominant culture, that is incredibly relevant.
How so?
Well, the best analogy I can think of is moving to a hyper-competitive, cutthroat city for a massive corporate job. You show up, and you are immediately surrounded by a culture that worships money, expects you to work 80-hour weeks, and encourages you to just step on the necks of your colleagues to get ahead.
Oh, that's a great modern parallel.
Right. Meanwhile, you are trying desperately not to lose the core moral values your family raised you with. How do you stay you when everyone around you is playing by different, much darker rules?
That captures the emotional weight of it perfectly. The pressure to adopt the ethics of whatever system is currently rewarding you, whether that's ancient Hellenism or modern corporate capitalism, is a universal human struggle.
It really is.
And the character of Tobit is presented as the ultimate case study in resisting that pressure.
Which brings us to the actual plot, because Tobit gives us his first major answer to that question of assimilation right out of the gate. And his answer is radical.
It's definitely not passive.
No, it's not just say your prayers and stay quiet. It's active, dangerous defiance.
So let's talk about the situation in Nineveh and what Tobit decides to do about the dead bodies.
Right, so we are in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. Tobit starts out doing quite well, actually. He's a buyer for the Assyrian king Shalmaneser.
He's got a good government job.
He does. But then the regime changes. King Sennacherib takes the throne, and things get incredibly dark for the captive Israelites.
Really dark.
Sennacherib is ruthless. He institutes a campaign of state-sponsored terror. When Israelites are executed or murdered, their bodies are thrown outside the city walls and literally just left to rot in the streets.
I want to pause right here and make sure we really understand the horror of this. Leaving bodies unburied wasn't just a matter of poor public sanitation back then.
No, not at all.
In the ancient Near East, proper burial was sacred. To leave a body exposed to scavengers was a deliberate, calculated act of psychological warfare.
It was the ultimate desecration. Exactly. The state is essentially sending a message. You are not human. You are garbage. And this is what happens if you step out of line.
It's a method of breaking the spirit of a conquered people. You deny them dignity in death to ensure they have no dignity in life.
But Tobit refuses to play along.
utterly refuses. He introduces himself in the text by saying he has walked all the days of his life in the ways of truth and justice, and he will not accept this new reality.
Even when it costs him.
Even when it threatens his livelihood, his safety, his own life, he sneaks out at night, steals the bodies of his murdered countrymen, and gives them a proper secret burial.
He is risking the death penalty to bury people he doesn't even know.
Yes.
He's not just burying his cousins, he's burying strangers simply because they are part of his community. And eventually, the inevitable happens, right? He gets caught.
He does. A citizen of Nineveh informs the king, and Tobit has to flee for his life.
Then he loses everything.
Everything. All his property is seized by the state. He goes from being a wealthy, connected man to a fugitive with absolutely nothing.
And this is where the text challenges us deeply. Because the author makes a very pointed observation about human nature in the aftermath.
He really does. After Sennacherib is assassinated and a new king takes over, Tobit's nephew, Ahikar, who we mentioned earlier, intervenes. He has a high position in the new administration.
Right, he's got political pull.
Exactly. He gets Tobit pardoned, and Tobit is allowed to return to his home in Nineveh and reunite with his wife, Anna, and his son, Tobias.
So he gets a second chance. He narrowly escaped death, lost all his money, but he finally gets his life back.
Right. And what is the very first thing he does?
I love this part.
It's the festival of Pentecost. Tobit sits down to an incredible, lavish feast. But before he takes a single bite, he tells his son Tobias to go out into the streets and find a poor person from their community to share the meal with.
Which is generous in itself.
Yes. But Tobias leaves, and then he comes running back and says, "Father, one of our nation has been murdered and cast out in the marketplace."
It's happening again.
Yeah.
The nightmare is repeating.
Yes. And Tobit's reaction is instantaneous. He jumps up, leaves his untouched holiday dinner, runs out into the marketplace, drags the murdered man's body into a room to hide it until sunset, and then sneaks out and buries him in the dark.
Okay, here is where I'm going to push back, or at least voice what I think a lot of modern readers would feel if they were in this situation.
Go for it.
If Tobit were our neighbor today, most of us would think he has a martyr complex. Or he's just plain foolish. We live in a culture that elevates self-preservation above almost everything else.
We definitely do.
We are taught to mind our own business, protect our assets, put our immediate family safety first. I mean, if I'm Tobias's mother, Anna, I'm screaming at my husband. I'm saying, "Are you insane? You just got your life back. You can't help the dead, Tobit. You are going to get yourself executed and leave your son an orphan."
And that is exactly what his own community tells him. Oh, yeah. The text explicitly notes that his neighbors mocked him. They laughed and said, "Is he no longer afraid? He already lost everything and had to flee for this exact crime, and look, here he goes, burying the dead again."
Wow.
His own people think he is out of his mind.
But that's the profound point the author is making, isn't it? True integrity is terribly inconvenient.
It rarely looks like a victory lap.
Right. We like to think of morality as something that makes us look good. But Tobit demonstrates that genuine moral conviction will often make you look like a fool to the people around you.
That's precisely the dynamic at play. Tobit's neighbors have assimilated. They have accepted the rules of Nineveh, which is the rule of fear and self-preservation.
You're keeping their heads down.
Exactly. But Tobit's ultimate allegiance is not to the terror of the state, nor is it to his own comfort or wealth. His allegiance is to a higher cosmic moral law. In his theological worldview, a human being is made in the image of God. Treating a human body like trash is a violation of the fabric of the universe. He simply will not allow the cruelty of Nineveh to dictate his morality.
So how do we translate this for you listening to this right now? Because obviously, the modern application isn't about sneaking out at night to bury bodies.
Thankfully, no.
What the text is really asking us to examine is the steep, real-world cost of compassion and integrity.
It's asking, what are you willing to lose? Today, that state-sponsored terror might be much more subtle.
Like what?
Well, it might look like a toxic corporate culture where a specific demographic of employees is routinely marginalized, ignored, or actively pushed out. Standing up for that colleague might mean you get labeled difficult by management.
You become the problem.
Right. You might get passed over for a promotion.
Or it's the whistleblowing scenario. You discover that your company is engaging in unethical practices, maybe defrauding clients or dumping environmental waste.
That's a perfect example.
If you blow the whistle, you aren't going to get a parade. You will likely be fired, sued, blacklisted in your industry. You will lose your property, just like Tobit did. Are you willing to do it anyway?
It forces a really uncomfortable audit of our own values. It is very easy to say we value justice or equity or kindness when it costs us absolutely nothing.
So easy.
It's much harder to maintain those values when there is a tangible, painful penalty for acting on them.
If you're listening and wondering how to practically apply this, think about this. What is one core principle you hold so deeply that you would actually be willing to lose money, social status, or your comfort to uphold it?
It's a terrifying question.
It really is. Because if you truly cannot name one thing, well, it might mean you've assimilated into the Nineveh around you much more than you realize. Your boundaries are defined by what is safe, not by what is right.
And what makes this text so sophisticated is that it doesn't give us a clean Disney-style payoff for Tobit's bravery.
Oh man, it really doesn't.
In a lesser story, Tobit would bury the dead man, and God would immediately reward him with a chest of gold.
Right. You'd expect the heavens to part, angels to sing, and Tobit to be vindicated in front of his mocking neighbors. But that is the exact opposite of what happens.
The exact opposite.
Doing the right thing doesn't result in a cinematic victory. It plunges Tobit into absolute ruin. Which brings us to the sequence of events that I think is the most jarring in the entire book.
The irony of what happens next is just devastating. Tobit has just performed this incredible act of righteousness by burying the murdered man. But because he has touched a corpse, under Jewish law, he is ritually impure.
So he can't go back into his house.
Right, he goes home, he washes himself, but he can't sleep inside his house or touch anything. So he sleeps outside in his courtyard by the wall, and because it's a hot night, he sleeps with his face uncovered.
I can barely even say this with a straight face, but it is deeply tragic.
It sounds like a joke, but it's awful.
While he is sleeping, sparrows drop their warm dung directly into his open eyes.
Yes. And it's not just a gross inconvenience. The bird droppings cause a severe bacterial infection. White films begin to grow over his eyes.
So he seeks medical help.
He does. He goes to the local physicians in Nineveh. But ancient medicine being what it was, the more they treat him with their salves and ointments, the worse the infection gets. Within a short time, Tobit goes completely blind.
He spends 4 years trapped in total darkness. Think about the psychological freefall he must have experienced.
Oh, it's unimaginable.
He went from being a respected buyer for the king, a man of action who defied empires, to a completely helpless dependent. He loses his ability to work, his ability to provide for his family, his independence. Everything is stripped away.
And the financial strain on his household becomes desperate. Because Tobit can't work, his wife, Anna, is forced to become the sole breadwinner.
She has to step up.
She takes on piecework, doing women's tasks like weaving and spinning for wealthy employers just to keep them from starving. The tension of this role reversal, the poverty, the sheer exhaustion, it all boils over into a deeply relatable, deeply human domestic argument.
This argument between Tobit and Anna is honestly one of my favorite scenes in ancient literature because it is just so psychologically real.
It really is.
So Anna finishes a big weaving job, and her employers pay her the wages, but they also give her a young kid goat as a bonus.
A nice little tip.
Yeah. She brings it home, and the goat starts bleeding. Tobit, sitting in the dark, paranoid and rigidly obsessed with his morality, immediately jumps to the worst conclusion.
He demands to know where the goat came from. He says, "Is it stolen? Return it to the owners. We have no right to eat anything that is stolen."
Which is just so infuriating.
Anna tries to explain that it was a gift, a bonus on top of her wages. But Tobit literally refuses to believe his own wife. He keeps demanding she return it, getting angry with her.
I am completely on Anna's side here. I mean, imagine being her. Your husband got you impoverished because he wouldn't stop burying bodies against the law. Then he gets himself blinded by sleeping in the yard.
Yeah, his righteous choices led to their ruin.
Exactly. You have been working your fingers to the bone, suffering the humiliation of menial labor to keep this blind, stubborn man alive. You finally get a little bonus, a tiny scrap of joy, and he accuses you of being a thief. He's being a massive jerk.
He really is. His trauma and his rigid sense of righteousness have made him entirely blind to his wife's reality, metaphorically blind this time.
Right.
And Anna finally snaps. She delivers what is arguably the most cutting, devastating line in the entire book. She looks at him and says, "Where are your alms deeds? Where is your righteous course of life? Behold, your case is known."
Ouch. I mean, to modernize that, she's essentially saying, where is your God now, Tobit? Where are all those righteous deeds? Look where they got you. You're blind, we're starving, and you're accusing the only person who is keeping you alive of being a criminal.
She goes straight for his theological jugular, and her words absolutely crush him. Because he knows she's right about his circumstances. His righteousness didn't protect him.
It's the ultimate crisis of faith.
It is. He breaks down in tears, turns his face to the wall, and prays for God to just end his life. He prays, "Command my spirit to be taken from me, that I may be released and become earth. For it is more profitable for me to die than to live, because I have heard false reproaches, and there is much sorrow in me."
He hits absolute rock bottom. But what's fascinating is how the author structures this narrative. Because the camera, so to speak, suddenly pans away from Nineveh, travels hundreds of miles east to the city of Ecbatana in Media, and zooms in on another tragedy happening at the exact same moment.
The cross-cutting here is masterful. At the exact same time, Tobit is weeping and praying for death in Nineveh. A young woman named Sarah is also weeping and praying for death in Ecbatana.
Sarah's situation is just horrific. Talk about trauma.
Oh, it's intense. Sarah is the daughter of a man named Ruggel. She has been given in marriage to 7 different men. And every single time on her wedding night, before the marriage can be consummated, the demon Asmodeus enters the bridal chamber and murders the husband.
7 times. The sheer grief, the fear, the reputation she must have had in that town. We talked about how Asmodeus is rooted in Persian mythology, this demon of wrath and lust. But the author doesn't really dwell on the mechanics of the demon, does he?
No, not at all. The focus is entirely on the psychological devastation it causes Sarah.
Yes, her isolation is total. And just like Tobit, the deepest pain comes from the people closest to her. Her own maidservants, the people who live in her house, turn on her.
They become incredibly cruel.
They start mocking her, accusing her of being the murderer. They scream at her, "You are the one who strangles your husbands. You've already had 7, and you haven't benefited from a single one. Why are you beating us? Because your husbands are dead. Go join them. May we never see a son or daughter of yours."
She's branded a cursed woman, a literal black widow. She goes up to the upper room of her father's house, fully intending to hang herself.
It's so dark.
But she stops. She realizes that if she kills herself, it will bring her elderly father's gray hairs down to the grave with sorrow, and she can't bear to inflict that shame on him. So instead, she stands by her window, stretches out her hands, and prays the same desperate prayer Tobit is praying.
Let me guess. Asking to die.
Yes.
Yeah.
She says, "Command that I be released from the earth and that I no more hear reproaches. 7 husbands of mine are dead already, and why should it be mine to live on?"
If we pull back and look at the broader human wisdom tradition, we see massive echoes of the Book of Job here, or what later Christian mystics would call the dark night of the soul.
Absolutely.
It is the universal experience of inexplicable, relentless suffering hitting people who haven't done anything to deserve it. Both Tobit and Sarah are righteous. Both are innocent. Both feel completely burdensome to their families.
And both are pushed to the absolute edge of existence by the mocking, cruel voices of the people around them.
This hits on such a visceral modern reality. The profound, suffocating isolation of chronic struggle. If you're listening to this, you might not be dealing with a literal demon or, sparrow dung, but you might know exactly what this feels like.
Many people do.
Maybe it's a chronic illness that has dragged on for years, and you feel like a burden to your spouse, just like Tobit. Maybe it's a string of repeated relationship failures, or a career that keeps collapsing no matter how hard you work, and you start to feel cursed, just like Sarah.
The text is doing something incredibly important here. It is validating that sometimes doing everything right still lands you in the dark. Life is not a vending machine where you put in good deeds and pull out prosperity.
Right. The theology of if you are good, you will be blessed is just completely shattered by the reality of human suffering.
It is, and it highlights a really painful truth about hitting rock bottom. When you are in that dark place, the voices of those around you can become a toxic echo chamber.
Oh, for sure.
Anna's exhausted frustration and the maid's cruelty amplify Tobit and Sarah's internal despair. It's so easy to internalize the exhaustion of the people taking care of you, or the judgment of people who don't understand your pain.
Which is why the way they handle it is so instructive. Notice what they don't do. Neither Tobit nor Sarah engage in toxic positivity.
Right, they don't pretend it's fine.
They don't try to force a smile and say, "Oh, God has a plan, everything happens for a reason." And they don't suffer in stoic silence either.
No, they pray incredibly raw, gritty, angry prayers. They essentially yell at the universe, "I'm done. I cannot take this anymore. Just let me die."
There is a profound psychological health in that honesty. If you are in a season of deep darkness, one of the most powerful things you can do is vocalize your despair honestly. Stop trying to protect God or the universe or your friends from your anger.
Audit those mocking voices.
Exactly. refuse to internalize their cruelty, and just admit, I am not okay.
It is that exact raw honesty that triggers the turning point of the entire book. The text tells us that at the selfsame time, the prayer of both was heard before the glory of the great Raphael, or in some translations, before the glory of God.
So they pray at the exact same moment.
Yes, the cries of Tobit in Assyria and Sarah in Media, hundreds of miles apart, rise up together.
The universe hears them. But the way the universe answers them is so fascinating to me because it completely subverts our expectations.
Yeah, it really does.
We pray for miracles, but the answer they get is remarkably mundane. Let's talk about the arrival of the archangel Raphael.
So God hears their prayers and sends Raphael to heal them both. But Raphael does not descend from the clouds with a flaming sword and a halo. He doesn't look like a divine being at all.
Right. So Tobit, convinced he is about to die, decides he needs to get his financial affairs in order for his family. He remembers that 20 years ago, he left a massive sum of silver in trust with a man named Gabail in Rages, a city in Media.
Convenient timing.
Very. So he calls his son Tobias and says, I need you to go to Media and get this money. Go outside and find a trusty man, a guide who knows the roads, to travel with you. Tobias walks out the front door, and standing right there in the street is the archangel Raphael.
But the text explicitly notes, he knew not that he was an angel of God. Raphael introduces himself as Azarias, the son of Ananias. He claims to be just an ordinary Israelite who is out of work.
Just a guy looking for a job.
Exactly. He says he knows the roads to Media perfectly. He knows exactly where Gabail lives, and he agrees to work for Tobias as a hired guide for a drachma a day, plus his living expenses.
And Tobit even brings him inside and interviews him to make sure his family background checks out.
He does.
I love that. He's cross-examining an archangel about his references, like, who's your dad?
Mm-hmm.
Are you from a good neighborhood? It is so incredibly relatable because when we are in crisis, we want the lightning bolt. Yeah. We want the dramatic cinematic resolution. We want the burning bush.
We want the obvious miracle.
But instead, what do we usually get? We get a recommendation for a really reliable contractor to fix the flooded basement, or we bump into a friend of a friend who just happens to know the hiring manager at the company we're applying to.
The author is making a profound theological statement here. In the post-exilic Jewish mindset, God is increasingly viewed as transcendent, high above the earth, separated from humanity. So he acts through intermediaries, through angels.
Right.
But the author pushes this further. The divine actually works through the entirely ordinary. Throughout the journey, Raphael doesn't fly Tobias to Media. He walks with him step by step. He eats with him. He gives him practical, mundane advice.
It's the disguise of providence. It's the idea that grace usually wears work boots.
Exactly. It represents the idea that we are never journeying alone, even when our companions seem purely, sometimes frustratingly, human. There's this incredibly subtle, beautiful moment before they leave.
With Anna, right?
Yes. Tobit's wife, Anna, is weeping bitterly. She doesn't care about the silver in Media. She's terrified her only son is going to be killed by bandits on the road. She says to Tobit, "Why have you sent our son away? Is he not the staff of our hand? Let not money be added to money. The life God has given us is enough."
And how does Tobit respond?
Tobit tries to comfort her by saying, "Do not worry, a good angel shall go with him, and his journey shall be prosperous."
He means it metaphorically, like, oh, God will be watching over him. He has absolutely no idea how literal he's being. The angel is literally standing in the driveway waiting for Tobias to pack his bags.
It challenges us to look differently at the people in our own lives.
Absolutely. Think about a current struggle you are facing right now. A project that's failing, a health issue, a parenting crisis. Who are the ordinary angels in your life? The practical, everyday people offering small bits of guidance, a listening ear, or a mundane favor?
Are you dismissing them?
Right. Are you dismissing them because their help doesn't look like the grand, sweeping miracle you prayed for? If you are so busy looking for a thunderbolt from heaven, you might completely ignore the guide standing right in front of you, offering to walk with you for a drachma a day.
It's a vital shift in perspective. Because it's only by accepting this ordinary-looking help that Tobias begins the journey that will ultimately save both his father and his future wife.
And that journey leads them to the Tigris River, where the story takes a sharp left turn into the surreal.
Very surreal.
Things get incredibly weird here. Let's dive into the fish incident, which is probably the most famous scene in the book. Set the scene for us on the banks of the Tigris.
Tobias and Raphael are camping by the Tigris River for the night. Tobias goes down to the water to wash his feet, and suddenly a giant fish leaps out of the river and tries to swallow his foot.
A giant fish.
Yes. Tobias screams in terror, but Raphael doesn't panic. He calmly tells Tobias, grasp and take hold of the fish. He doesn't step in and kill it for him. He orders Tobias to wrestle it. So Tobias grapples with this monster and drags it up onto the dry land.
And then Raphael gives him a very bizarre set of instructions. He tells him to cut the fish open and to carefully harvest 3 specific organs: the heart, the liver, and the gall, or the gallbladder. He says to pack them away safely because they make excellent medicine.
A very specific shopping list.
Very. They roast the rest of the meat, eat dinner, and continue their journey.
And later on, those exact harvested organs are the keys to resolving the 2 massive tragedies of the book.
How so?
Well, when they finally approach Ecbatana, Raphael tells Tobias that they are going to stay at the house of Raguel, and that Tobias has the right to marry Raguel's daughter, Sarah.
And Tobias is understandably terrified.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he knows the rumors. He says to Raphael, I've heard she's been married to 7 men who all died in the bridal chamber because a demon is in love with her. I am my father's only child. If I die, the grief will kill my parents.
Tobias is basically saying, I know I'm the protagonist, but I am not volunteering for a suicide mission.
Exactly. But Raphael gives him the strategy. He tells Tobias that when he enters the bridal chamber, he must take the heart and liver of the fish he caught and burn them on the ashes of incense. The smoke will drive the demon away permanently.
And it works.
It does. Tobias trusts him. He marries Sarah. They go into the room. He burns the fish organs. And the text says the demon Asmodeus smells the smoke, flees all the way to the upper parts of Egypt, and Raphael chases him down and binds him.
And then the gall of the fish comes into play later, right?
Yes. After a lengthy wedding celebration and retrieving the silver, Tobias and Raphael return home to Nineveh. Tobit, still blind, stumbles out to meet them. Raphael tells Tobias to take the fish gall and rub it directly into his father's blind eyes.
Which sounds painful.
It is. The gall acts as a severe irritant. Tobit rubs his eyes, the white films literally peel away like scales, and his sight is completely restored. He sees his son for the first time in over 4 years, and the family is thrown into absolute ecstasy.
Okay, this is the part of the deep dive where we need to exercise some serious discernment. Because as modern guides to this text, we cannot just accept this at face value. We are not blindly endorsing the idea that burning fish liver cures spiritual attacks, or that rubbing fish gallbladder in someone's eyes is a good treatment for cataracts.
Please, please do not rub fish organs in anyone's eyes. It will cause a massive infection.
Right. So what is actually happening here? Why is the author using these specific magical elements?
It goes back to the cultural mashup we discussed earlier. The author is utilizing popular Magian and Zoroastrian folklore of his day. In those ancient Persian traditions, certain animal parts were widely believed to have magical epitropaic properties.
Apotropaic, meaning?
Meaning having the power to ward off evil or bad luck. Smoke, pungent smells, and bitter substances like gall were commonly used in ancient folk medicine and exorcism rituals. The author is simply borrowing a familiar cultural trope, a magical cure to advance his plot and keep his ancient audience entertained.
But if we step back from the literal ancient medical advice, if we stop worrying about the actual fish liver and look at the metaphor the author has constructed, it is absolutely breathtaking.
The metaphor is where the real wisdom is.
Think about the sequence of events. Tobias is minding his own business, and a monster leaps out of the river to consume him. It is a terrifying, life-threatening attack. But instead of running away from the threat, on the advice of his guide, he grapples with it, he conquers it, and then he extracts something from it.
He harvests the beast.
Yes, and those very organs, the very thing that tried to destroy him, become the exact medicine used to heal his family's deepest, most intractable wounds.
The monster becomes the medicine. I think that is a brilliant way to frame it. In modern psychological terms, we would call this the concept of post-traumatic growth.
Yes. Expand on that, because I think this is the most powerful modern application in the entire text.
Post-traumatic growth is the profound idea that the darkest, most frightening traumas or challenges we face in life don't just have to be survived. They don't just leave us permanently damaged.
Right.
If those traumas are processed, if they are integrated or harvested, to use the metaphor of the fish, the wisdom and resilience extracted from that pain becomes a powerful tool. It becomes the exact medicine we use to heal our own blindness and to drive away the demons of others who are suffering.
Now, I do want to push back slightly here because there's a danger in this concept. Sometimes people use the idea of post-traumatic growth to romanticize trauma.
Oh, definitely. That's a huge pitfall.
They say, oh, everything happens for a reason, or that horrible thing that happened to you was a blessing in disguise. And I think that's incredibly damaging. A monster attacking you is not a blessing. A demon killing 7 husbands is not a blessing.
That is a crucial distinction. The fish leaping out of the river was not a blessing. It was a lethal threat. The text doesn't say the fish was secretly good. It says the fish was a monster.
Right.
But the growth happens in what Tobias does with the monster after he survives the attack. Raphael doesn't slay the fish for Tobias. He tells Tobias, you catch it, you cut it open. The individual must do the hard, visceral work of grappling with the trauma and extracting the lesson.
That reframes it completely. It's not that the trauma is good, it's that nothing has to be wasted. The pain can be repurposed.
Repurposed, exactly.
Think about addiction recovery. A sponsor in an AA meeting uses the very addiction that almost drowned them in the river of life, their personal monster, as the exact experience they draw upon to help banish the demons of addiction for the person they are mentoring.
That's a beautiful example.
Or think about someone who survives a brutal, toxic workplace. The resilience, the boundaries, and the political savvy they had to develop just to survive that monster become the exact skills they use to mentor younger employees so they don't get eaten alive. Your pain, when processed, becomes your superpower.
It transforms suffering from a senseless tragedy into a potential resource for the community. The scars become credentials.
If you're listening to this, I want you to try this reflection. Think of a severe hardship you have survived. Your personal fish. It could be a devastating divorce, a massive career failure, a period of deep depression, or a health crisis.
I all have one.
We do. Now ask yourself, have you harvested anything from it? How can the hard-won lessons from that specific painful experience be used right now to bring clarity like curing Tobit's blindness or comfort like exorcising Sarah's fear to someone else who is currently standing by the same river? How can you turn your monster into medicine for your community?
That outward focus, using your resources and your experiences to heal the community, leads us perfectly into the next major theme of the book. Because once Tobit has his sight restored and the family is reunited, he realizes he is nearing the end of his life.
He's an old man now.
He sits his son down to impart a final, overarching philosophy of life. He wants to ensure that the spirit of communal survival outlasts him.
Which brings us to the topic of almsgiving. Let me tell you, Tobit talks about charity a lot. It borders on an obsession.
He really does. Yeah. Throughout the entire book, almsgiving is elevated to an almost supreme virtue. In his advice to Tobias before the journey to Media, and again after the angel reveals his true identity, the message is hammered home repeatedly.
What does he say exactly?
Listen to these lines from chapter 4. Give alms of thy substance. Turn not away thy face from any poor man, and the face of God shall not be turned away from thee. He goes on to say, if thou have much, according to the abundance thereof, give alms. If thou have little, bestow it, and be not afraid to give alms according to that little.
Give even when you have little.
Yes. And then he makes this massive theological claim. For thou layest up a good treasure for thyself against the day of necessity. Because alms delivereth from death, and suffereth not to come into darkness.
Okay, I have to raise a red flag here. Because I think a lot of modern listeners, regardless of their background, might find this language really uncomfortable.
Why is that?
Well, on one hand, it sounds highly transactional, like give money to God so you don't die. It almost sounds like a prosperity gospel pitch, or like buying spiritual insurance against bad luck.
It does sound like a divine protection racket if you read it out of context.
Exactly. And on the other hand, we live in a modern culture that is driven by intense systemic financial anxiety. We have retirement accounts we are told we must fund, mortgages that take 30 years to pay off, inflation eating our groceries, healthcare costs.
It's an endless.
Our mindset is inherently one of scarcity and hoarding. We are culturally conditioned to build our own private fortresses of wealth to protect ourselves. So Tobit's advice, to give money away even when you are poor, and to trust that it will somehow deliver you from death, it feels counterintuitive. It might even feel irresponsible to a modern ear.
This is where we have to re-inject the historical context we talked about at the very beginning. Remember the audience. Jewish exiles living in the diaspora around 200 BC.
Right.
In the ancient Hellenistic world, there was no government welfare system for marginalized minorities. There was no FDIC insurance, no unemployment benefits, no social security. They were a vulnerable subculture.
Completely on their own.
In that environment, almsgiving wasn't just a nice charitable thing you did on holidays to feel good about yourself. It was the ultimate and literally the only safety net that kept the community alive.
So it wasn't just individual morality, it was communal survival.
Exactly. If the wealthy members of the diaspora hoarded their resources, the poor literally starved to death, and the community fractured and assimilated. So when Tobit says alms delivereth from death, he isn't just speaking in a spiritual metaphor about the afterlife. He is stating a socioeconomic reality.
Give or we die.
Radical generosity was the glue of their physical survival in exile. You gave to the poor because tomorrow the king might confiscate your property, and you would be the one needing the alms.
That makes complete sense historically. But how do we translate that for today? Because most of us do live in societies with at least some form of social safety net, even if it's flawed. How does Tobit's obsession with giving apply to us, beyond just writing a tax-deductible check to a charity?
In the 21st century, the practice of radical generosity serves a slightly different but equally vital function. It is the ultimate antidote to the scarcity mindset.
Tell me more about that.
When we are gripped by financial anxiety, which almost all of us are, our world shrinks. We become isolated, defensive, and hyper-focused only on our own accumulation. We view other people as competitors for limited resources. But giving away our resources, especially when we feel we don't have a massive abundance, breaks the psychological grip of materialism.
It's a physical action that rewires the brain.
Yes. When you give, you are physically forcing your brain to acknowledge, I have enough to share. I am not in mortal danger. It reminds us that we are part of a connected human web, not isolated dragons hoarding gold in a cave.
I have actually experienced this personally. During times in my life when I felt the most stressed about money, the absolute best thing I could do to break the panic was to go buy a friend lunch or make a spontaneous donation to a cause I cared about.
It seems backwards, but it works.
It sounds crazy to spend money when you're stressed about money, but it shatters the spell. It shifts your posture from clutching tight, shoulders hunched, to opening your hands. Tobit says, "Let not thine eye be grudging when thou givest alms." It's about the state of the heart as much as the state of the wallet.
It's fascinating because the angel Raphael, right before he ascends back to heaven at the end of the story, echoes this exact sentiment. He tells Tobit and Tobias, "Better is prayer with truth, and alms with righteousness than riches with unrighteousness."
Wow.
It is better to give alms than to lay up gold. For alms doth deliver from death, and it shall purge away all sin. He is explicitly prioritizing human connection and communal care over personal accumulation.
So if you are listening to this and you want to put Tobit to the test, here is your practice for the week. It's simple, but very challenging. Give something away.
Highly recommend.
It could be a sum of money, it could be your time, or it could be a valuable resource or professional skill you have. But here is the catch. Do not do it out of your excess. Don't just give the leftover change in your cup holder.
That doesn't trigger the shift.
Give something that pinches just a little bit. Do it specifically to exercise your generosity muscle when it feels a little uncomfortable. Do it to rebel against the anxiety of scarcity. Notice the psychological shift it creates in you when you act as a conduit of resources rather than a cul-de-sac.
It is a profoundly powerful way to reorient your identity in a consumer culture. And establishing that identity of radical generosity perfectly sets up Tobit's final and perhaps most surprising piece of advice to his son.
Yes, let's look at the conclusion of the book. Tobit lives a long, joyful life after his sight is restored and his son returns. The text says he lives to be 112 years old. Some manuscripts say 158. But either way, he lives to a ripe old age.
He's had a full life.
He is surrounded by his grandchildren, the community is thriving, and everything seems perfect. But on his deathbed, he calls Tobias in, and he gives him one last stark command.
He calls Tobias and says, "Depart thou from Nineveh, and abide not here." He references the ancient prophets, specifically Jonah and Nahum, and says he knows for a certainty that the corrupt, violent city of Nineveh will eventually be destroyed.
He knows it's doomed.
He tells Tobias that as soon as his mother Anna dies and is buried next to him, Tobias must immediately pack up his entire family and move to Media to live in peace. Tobit says, "I see that there is much unrighteousness therein, and much guile is wrought therein, and they are not ashamed."
I just find the beauty and the sorrow of this so striking. Think about the arc of Tobit's whole life. He spent decades, literally a century, trying to be a good man in a bad city.
The ultimate resistance.
He risked his life to bury the dead. He fed the hungry. He tried so hard to be the light in the overwhelming darkness of the Assyrian capital. He poured his blood, sweat, and tears into Nineveh. But his ultimate wisdom for the next generation, for the son he loves more than anything, is, you don't have to stay here.
It is a profound, incredibly mature realization of limits. Tobit is acknowledging reality. There's a time to endure. There's a time to be the righteous minority, resisting the toxic culture, doing good works, and fighting the system from within.
But not forever.
Exactly. There is also a time to recognize that a system, a city, or a culture is fundamentally irredeemable. Tobit realizes that Nineveh will not change. The state-sponsored terror, the unrighteousness, the lack of shame, it's baked into the very foundation of the society.
And he doesn't want that for his son.
He loves his son too much to demand that he martyrs his life trying to fix a machine that is designed to crush him.
Knowing when to walk away. That is such a hard lesson for conscientious people. We often feel like if we just try a little harder, if we're just a bit more patient, we can change the toxic workplace. We can fix the abusive relationship.
I think we can save it.
We can redeem the harmful community or the broken institution. We take it upon ourselves to be the savior. But the modern translation of Tobit's deathbed wisdom is that leaving is not always failing. Sometimes packing your bags is the most righteous, healthy thing you can do.
It requires deep, quiet discernment to know the difference between a difficult season you need to endure for a greater purpose and a Nineveh that is fundamentally destructive to your soul. Tobit tells his son to go to Media, to go to where his wife's family is, to where there is peace and support.
A fresh start.
He is telling him to go build a healthy future, what the apocalyptic texts of the time would envision as the New Jerusalem. But the point is, you cannot build a New Jerusalem if you are spending all of your energy just trying to survive the toxic fallout of Nineveh. You have to leave the burning building to build a new one.
I think that is a perfect question for us to leave you with, to chew on. What is the Nineveh in your life right now? Is there a corporate culture, a specific relationship, a social circle, or an institution that is slowly but surely eroding your values and exhausting your spirit?
Are you staying out of a misplaced sense of loyalty?
Thinking you're supposed to be the lone savior of a broken system, what steps do you actually need to take to pack up and leave so you can build something beautiful elsewhere?
It is the ultimate act of self-preservation, but not in the selfish, hoarding way we discussed earlier. It is preserving your capacity to live a life of truth, compassion, and almsgiving. And you simply cannot do those things if you are crushed under the falling walls of a corrupt city.
This book just hits on so many levels. When you really take the time to unpack it, the richness is astonishing. From the sheer absurdity and hilarity of the bird dung to the deep, resonant trauma of Sarah in the upper room.
It really runs the gamut of human experience.
To the monster fish and the tigress, to the undercover angel negotiating a daily wage, it is a masterpiece of ancient storytelling.
And it serves exactly the purpose its author intended when he sat down to write it in the diaspora around 200 BC. It tells the reader, whether ancient or modern, that your identity matters, that your integrity will cost you dearly, that your suffering is seen by the divine, that help will come in ordinary ways, and that your generosity will save your community.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. As we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive, history and textual scholarship tell us this book is almost certainly a work of historical fiction. It's a parable constructed from Jewish theology, Persian myths, and ancient Egyptian folklore, rather than a literal documentary of 8th century Assyria. But does that make it less true?
That's the real question.
Perhaps the ultimate enduring wisdom of the Book of Tobit is that the narratives we choose to believe, the stories we tell ourselves about hidden angels walking beside us, about conquered demons fleeing into the desert, about the ultimate triumph of radical compassion over state terror, are the exact things that shape our reality. The parables we hold on to are what give us the strength to survive our own exiles, to heal our blindness, and to keep walking.
Beautifully said.
That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.